Warning: your current life is about to change forever. Because your soulmate finally chose you. There is a reason you found this message today, and it is not an accident. Something has shifted in the unseen world, something that has been quietly unfolding long before this moment. While you've been questioning the delays, wondering why doors kept closing, and asking yourself if the connection you felt was ever real, another story has been taking place where you could not see it. Your soulmate has been standing at the edge of a life-changing decision, caught between the comfort of the life they already knew and the undeniable pull of the bond they could no longer ignore. For a long time, fear spoke louder than love. Doubt disguised itself as logic. Distance pretended to be destiny. But now, everything has changed. The choice they resisted for so long has finally been made, and once a decision is made from the deepest part of the soul, nothing around it can remain the same. This is not simply about romance. It is about the moment two separate paths begin bending toward one future. The life you recognize today is preparing to become a memory, because the next chapter has already begun moving toward you. The signs may still be subtle, the timing may still feel mysterious, but the direction is no longer uncertain. Your soulmate has finally chosen you, and that single decision is creating waves that are about to transform both of your lives forever. If you believe this message reached you for a reason and you don't want to miss what comes next, subscribe now and stay with me until the very end. For years, you believed that if this connection were truly meant to be, everything would have unfolded easily. You expected clear answers, obvious signs, and a path without so many unexpected turns. Instead, your journey became a collection of unanswered questions. There were moments when hope burned brightly, followed by seasons where silence felt louder than any words ever spoken. You may have convinced yourself that the story had ended before it truly began, yet deep within your spirit there remained a quiet certainty that refused to disappear. That feeling was never random. It was the invisible thread connecting two hearts that were still growing into the people they needed to become before destiny could bring them together in the right way. While you focused on healing from disappointments and trying to build a life that made sense without them, your soulmate was walking through a completely different battle. From the outside, they appeared to be moving forward, making ordinary decisions and living an ordinary life. But beneath the surface, every step they took carried an unspoken weight. No matter how far they tried to travel emotionally or physically, they kept encountering reminders that something essential was missing. It was not because they lacked success or relationships or distractions. It was because the place in their heart designed for this connection could never truly be filled by anything temporary. There were countless moments when they almost reached out. Their hand hovered over a phone. Your name crossed their mind during quiet evenings. Familiar places unexpectedly reminded them of emotions they had tried to bury. Yet each time, fear convinced them to wait a little longer. They believed they needed more certainty before taking the next step. They wanted guarantees that life could never provide. Instead of following what their soul already knew, they listened to the voices of doubt, responsibility, and past pain. Every delay created more distance, but strangely, it also made the connection impossible to forget. At the same time, your own journey was quietly preparing you for something much greater than you realized. The disappointments you experienced were not meaningless punishments. They were lessons teaching you strength, patience, discernment, and self-worth. Every relationship that failed to understand your heart was revealing what genuine love should never require you to sacrifice. Every lonely season was shaping the version of yourself that would one day be capable of receiving a love built on truth instead of fear. Although those seasons felt empty, they were actually full of unseen preparation. What makes this moment different from every other chapter is that the balance has finally begun to shift. The waiting is no longer producing the same lessons because those lessons have already been learned. The emotional walls that once protected both of you are beginning to lose their purpose. Situations that once kept you apart are quietly changing behind the scenes. Conversations are happening. Old beliefs are breaking apart. Priorities are being rearranged without either of you fully understanding why. The invisible movement has already started, even if the visible results have not yet appeared. Your soulmate has reached a place where running no longer feels like freedom. For the first time, they are beginning to understand that avoiding this connection has required more emotional energy than embracing it ever would have. They have discovered that every attempt to silence their heart only made its voice stronger. The memories they tried to erase became clearer. The future they imagined without you became less convincing. Slowly, almost without realizing it, they have started measuring every important decision against one simple question: does this lead me closer to the life my heart truly wants? That question is changing everything. It is opening doors that once seemed permanently locked and creating possibilities neither of you could have imagined during the hardest moments of separation. What you cannot yet see is that this unseen transformation is only the beginning, because the silence that once defined your connection is hiding a truth far deeper than anyone expected, and that truth is about to reveal why your soulmate remained quiet for so long. The silence between you and your soulmate was never as empty as it appeared. On the surface, it looked like distance, hesitation, or even indifference. Friends may have told you to let go. Your own thoughts may have whispered that if this connection were real, they would have already come forward. But the soul does not measure time the way the human mind does. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually preparation unfolding behind a curtain that has not yet been lifted. Every day of waiting was shaping a future that could not have survived if it had arrived too soon. Your soulmate carried burdens they rarely allowed anyone to see. They had learned to hide uncertainty behind confidence and disguise fear as responsibility. To the people around them, they seemed capable, independent, and in control. Yet when they were alone with their thoughts, they wrestled with questions they could not answer. They wondered whether they deserved a love as deep as the one they felt pulling them toward you. Old disappointments convinced them that happiness was temporary and that opening their heart completely would only lead to another painful ending. Instead of risking everything, they convinced themselves that staying silent was the safer choice. But silence has a price. Every opportunity they ignored left an echo inside them. Every moment they chose comfort over courage became another reminder that they were living only part of the life they were meant to experience. They could celebrate achievements, laugh with other people, and continue their daily routines, yet something always felt unfinished. It was as though they were reading a story with the final chapters missing. No matter how much they tried to move forward, the feeling that someone important was absent refused to disappear. At the same time, your own intuition became stronger. There were days when you suddenly thought about them without any obvious reason. Certain songs, places, numbers, or unexpected conversations stirred emotions that seemed impossible to explain. You may have dismissed these moments as coincidence, but your heart recognized something your mind could not fully understand. Invisible connections often reveal themselves through quiet impressions before they ever become visible realities. Those subtle moments were not asking you to chase your soulmate. They were gently reminding you that the bond had never been completely broken. As the months passed, life began placing your soulmate in situations that forced them to confront the truth they had avoided. They watched other relationships fail because they were built on appearances instead of authenticity. They saw people settle for comfort while secretly longing for something real. These experiences became mirrors, reflecting their own choices back to them. The excuses that once felt reasonable slowly lost their power. Deep inside, they realized they were not protecting themselves anymore. They were only delaying the life their heart had been trying to lead them toward all along. This realization did not arrive in one dramatic moment. It unfolded quietly, through ordinary days that suddenly carried extraordinary meaning. A simple conversation lingered longer than expected. A familiar memory returned with unexpected clarity. A peaceful evening became impossible to enjoy because thoughts of you would not leave their mind. Piece by piece, the emotional walls they had built over the years began to crack. The version of themselves that once feared choosing love was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone who understood that real peace is found in honesty, not avoidance. Without knowing it, both of your lives were beginning to move toward the same turning point. The circumstances around you were shifting in ways that seemed unrelated, yet every change was bringing your paths closer together. The delays were nearing their end, not because fate suddenly changed its mind, but because both hearts were finally becoming ready for the same future at the same time. And although neither of you could fully see it yet, the choice your soulmate was about to make would become the moment that transformed everything, setting in motion a chain of events that neither fear nor distance could stop. The silence your soulmate carried was never created because they stopped caring. It was born from an invisible conflict that grew stronger each time they imagined stepping toward you. On one side stood the voice of their heart, quietly reminding them that some connections cannot be explained by logic alone. On the other side stood years of fear, disappointment, and self-protection, convincing them that choosing love would require risking everything they had carefully built. Every day they delayed was another day spent between these two opposing forces, unable to fully move forward and unable to truly walk away. There were moments when they convinced themselves that ignoring the connection would eventually make it disappear. They filled their schedule with responsibilities, surrounded themselves with distractions, and focused on goals that seemed more practical than listening to their emotions. For a while, it appeared to work. Life continued moving, conversations happened, and the world around them expected nothing unusual. But the quiet hours always returned. Late at night, when every distraction faded, they found themselves thinking about the one person who never completely left their heart. No matter how much time passed, your presence remained alive within them. What frightened them most was not the possibility of rejection. It was the realization that choosing you would require becoming a different version of themselves. They knew they could not carry old fears, unhealthy habits, and emotional walls into the future they secretly desired. Real love demanded honesty, vulnerability, and courage, qualities they had spent years hiding beneath certainty and control. Deep inside, they understood that before they could truly choose you, they first had to choose growth. While this transformation unfolded within them, life itself began exposing the limits of everything they once depended upon. Situations they believed would bring lasting fulfillment suddenly felt empty. Achievements that once seemed important no longer provided the same satisfaction. Even familiar relationships began revealing emotional gaps they had previously ignored. These experiences were not punishments. They were gentle awakenings, showing them that success without genuine connection could never satisfy the deepest needs of the soul. At the same time, you were unknowingly becoming stronger as well. Every challenge you faced taught you not to chase what was unwilling to stay. Instead, you learned patience, self-respect, and trust in timing beyond your control. The person you were becoming no longer depended on constant reassurance from others. That quiet confidence created the space necessary for a healthier future, one built on mutual choice instead of fear or desperation. Now, something remarkable is beginning to happen. Your soulmate no longer sees this connection as an impossible dream. For the first time, they are beginning to understand that every painful delay carried a purpose. The fear that once controlled their decisions is slowly losing its voice, while the truth they have been avoiding grows impossible to ignore. A decision is forming within them, one that will not be based on pressure, loneliness, or impulse, but on clarity. And once that decision is fully made, the life both of you have known until now will never look the same again. The closer your soulmate came to this moment of truth, the more impossible it became to continue living as though nothing had changed. They began noticing how often your memory appeared in the quiet spaces of their day. It was never forced. It arrived unexpectedly, in the warmth of a sunrise, in a familiar melody playing through a store, in a passing conversation that reminded them of something only the two of you could have understood. These moments were gentle, yet impossible to ignore. They were no longer random memories. They felt like quiet reminders that the connection had remained alive beneath every layer of fear. At first, they resisted these feelings once again. They told themselves they were simply being emotional or nostalgic. They tried to explain everything through logic because logic had always made them feel safe. But the heart has a language that cannot be silenced forever. The more they searched for practical reasons to dismiss the bond, the stronger it became. Every explanation eventually led back to the same undeniable truth: they had never truly stopped choosing you in their heart, even while their actions suggested otherwise. This realization brought both peace and discomfort. Peace, because they finally understood why nothing else had completely satisfied them. Discomfort, because they now recognized how much time had been lost allowing fear to guide their decisions. Instead of blaming fate, they began taking responsibility for the distance that had grown between you. That shift changed everything. The person who once waited for perfect circumstances started realizing that courage creates opportunities where fear only creates delays. Meanwhile, your own life was quietly reflecting the same transformation. You may have noticed yourself letting go of old disappointments without even realizing it. Things that once caused overwhelming pain no longer carried the same weight. You became more focused on your purpose, your healing, and the peace you were building within yourself. Without knowing it, you were preparing emotionally for a connection that could only flourish when both people had learned to stand firmly on their own. The unseen world was aligning countless small details behind the scenes. Conversations that needed to happen were beginning. Obstacles that once seemed permanent were gradually losing their influence. New opportunities, unexpected encounters, and surprising changes were drawing closer with each passing day. None of these events appeared dramatic on their own, yet together they formed a path leading toward the same destination. The choice your soulmate had finally made was already creating movement long before either of you could witness the outcome. Soon, hesitation would no longer define this story. The silence that once separated two hearts was reaching its final chapter. Your soulmate was no longer asking whether they should follow the call they had felt for so long. They were beginning to ask how they could step into that future with honesty, humility, and unwavering commitment. That single change in perspective marked the beginning of a completely new season, one where fear would slowly surrender to faith, and where the decision they had finally made would prepare both of you for a reunion unlike anything either of you had imagined. The greatest transformation rarely begins with a dramatic event. More often, it starts in complete silence, deep within the heart where no one else can see it. That is exactly where your soulmate found themselves. One ordinary day, they realized they were exhausted, not from work, responsibilities, or the demands of life, but from carrying the weight of denying what they truly felt. They finally understood that pretending the connection no longer mattered had become far more painful than admitting the truth. In that quiet realization, something inside them shifted forever. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking themselves what other people would think. They stopped measuring every decision against expectations that had never brought them peace. Instead, they asked a much simpler question: what kind of life will I regret not living? The answer came almost immediately. They knew they would regret allowing fear to make another choice for them. They would regret never discovering what this connection could become if they had the courage to follow it. That realization became the turning point they had been unknowingly waiting for. As this new awareness grew stronger, the world around them seemed different. Places they visited felt more meaningful. Conversations carried unexpected lessons. Even small moments of stillness became opportunities for reflection rather than escape. They no longer viewed the past as a collection of mistakes. Instead, they began recognizing how every disappointment had prepared them to appreciate a love built on honesty instead of illusion. Their pain was no longer their prison. It had become their teacher. At the same time, your energy was changing in ways you might not have fully noticed. Instead of constantly wondering when everything would happen, you were slowly finding peace within the present moment. You began trusting yourself more than your fears. The desperation that once surrounded your prayers started transforming into quiet confidence. You were no longer trying to force the future into existence. You were becoming the person capable of embracing it when it finally arrived. That inner peace created a powerful balance between both of your journeys. Your soulmate could now see something they had missed for a very long time. Love was never asking them to become someone else. It was inviting them to become the most authentic version of themselves. Every mask they had worn to protect their heart was beginning to fall away. Every excuse that once justified silence sounded weaker than before. The life they had carefully planned without considering this connection suddenly felt incomplete, while the future that once frightened them now carried a sense of hope they had never experienced. This awakening was not the end of their journey, it was the beginning of a completely new chapter. The decision had been made within their heart, but now life itself would begin responding to that choice. Doors that once remained closed would slowly start opening, unexpected opportunities would appear, and signs would become impossible to ignore. The transformation inside your soulmate was preparing both of you for the moment when destiny would no longer whisper from a distance but stand directly in front of you, impossible to deny. After making this quiet decision within their heart, your soulmate began noticing that life no longer felt random. Events that once seemed unrelated started connecting like pieces of a puzzle. A conversation with a stranger echoed words they had been wrestling with in private. An old photograph resurfaced unexpectedly, reminding them of a version of themselves that still believed in genuine love. Even the simplest moments carried an unusual sense of purpose, as though life itself was gently confirming that they were finally walking in the right direction. What surprised them most was how much lighter they felt. The circumstances around them had not completely changed, yet something inside them had. The burden of resisting their own heart had disappeared. Instead of constantly questioning every emotion, they allowed themselves to feel without immediately trying to explain everything away. That freedom brought a peace they had been searching for in countless other places. They realized that certainty does not always arrive before the first step. Sometimes certainty is born because the first courageous step is taken. As this inner peace grew stronger, they also began seeing you differently. The memories they once viewed through the lens of fear were now illuminated by gratitude. They remembered your kindness, your patience, and the quiet strength you carried even during difficult moments. They understood that the connection had never been asking for perfection. It had always been inviting both of you to grow into people capable of loving with honesty, maturity, and unwavering commitment. What once seemed like impossible distance now felt like a journey that had prepared both of you for something far greater. Meanwhile, changes continued unfolding in your own life. You may have noticed new opportunities appearing where there had once been closed doors. You may have found yourself letting go of people, habits, or beliefs that no longer reflected the person you were becoming. At first these changes may have seemed unrelated, but they were creating space for a new season. Sometimes the soul must release what no longer belongs before it can fully receive what has been waiting all along. Every ending you experienced was quietly making room for a meaningful beginning. The invisible bond between you and your soulmate was becoming stronger than ever because it was no longer built on longing alone. It was being strengthened by growth, wisdom, and mutual readiness. Both of you had walked through separate valleys of uncertainty, and both of you had discovered that real love cannot be sustained by emotion alone. It requires courage, truth, forgiveness, and the willingness to leave old versions of yourselves behind. That shared transformation was becoming the foundation for everything that was about to unfold. Now the journey was approaching another powerful turning point. The awakening within your soulmate had prepared them to recognize the signs they once ignored, and those signs were beginning to appear with remarkable clarity. What had once seemed like ordinary coincidences would soon reveal themselves as meaningful confirmations, guiding both of you toward the future that had been quietly drawing closer from the very beginning. The next stage of this story would uncover those signs, showing how every small detail has been leading to this life-changing moment. By the time your soulmate fully accepted the truth within their heart, the world around both of you began speaking in ways that words never could. The signs did not arrive with loud announcements or dramatic miracles. Instead, they appeared through moments so natural that they could easily be overlooked by anyone who was not paying attention. Yet for those willing to notice, each one carried a quiet reminder that something extraordinary was unfolding behind the scenes. You may have found yourself waking with an unexpected sense of peace, even though nothing in your outward circumstances had changed. The worries that once greeted you every morning seemed lighter, replaced by an unexplainable feeling that something good was drawing near. This calm was not based on visible evidence. It came from deep within, as if your spirit already recognized what your eyes had not yet seen. When hope begins to return without a clear reason, it is often because unseen change has already begun. At the same time, your soulmate was experiencing moments they could no longer dismiss as coincidence. Thoughts of you appeared during the most ordinary parts of the day. They would pause in the middle of a busy schedule because a memory suddenly felt vivid enough to bring a smile, or even tears. They noticed qualities in other people that reminded them of you, yet instead of replacing your memory, those moments only made your presence feel more significant. The more they tried to understand why, the clearer it became that the connection had never faded. It had simply been waiting for the right season to bloom. Another sign appeared through unexpected changes in timing. Plans that once seemed fixed began shifting without warning. Opportunities opened where obstacles had previously stood. Delays that once felt frustrating slowly revealed hidden blessings. Looking back, both of you would eventually realize that many of the disappointments you experienced were actually protecting you from arriving too early. What felt like rejection was often redirection, leading each of you toward a future that required better timing than either of you could have planned. You may also have noticed that your perspective on the past was changing. Memories that once caused pain were beginning to lose their grip. Instead of replaying old wounds, you started recognizing the lessons hidden within them. Forgiveness became easier, not because what happened no longer mattered, but because your heart was becoming too strong to remain trapped by yesterday. That emotional freedom was another powerful sign that you were stepping into a completely different chapter of your life. While all of this was unfolding, your soulmate was quietly preparing for something they had avoided for far too long. They were no longer asking whether destiny was real. They were beginning to recognize that every unexpected sign, every inner prompting, and every peaceful confirmation was leading them toward one unavoidable conclusion. The choice they had finally made was no longer just an emotion hidden inside their heart. It was becoming a direction that would soon influence their actions, bringing both of your journeys closer to the moment when what has remained unseen for so long would finally become reality. As these quiet signs continued appearing, another change began unfolding, one that neither of you could have predicted. Your soulmate started noticing that the future they had once imagined no longer felt right. Goals that had seemed so important suddenly lost their emotional weight, while thoughts of building a life based on authenticity became stronger with each passing day. They were no longer chasing an image of success that impressed other people. They were searching for a life that brought genuine peace, and every path leading toward that peace somehow pointed back to the choice they had finally made. At the same time, you may have sensed a growing confidence within yourself. Instead of constantly wondering whether your soulmate would ever return, you began focusing on becoming the happiest and healthiest version of yourself. Without realizing it, you stopped living from a place of waiting and started living with purpose. That shift was significant because true alignment is often found when your happiness no longer depends on another person's actions. You were creating a life filled with gratitude, hope, and quiet strength, making room for love to enter without fear or desperation. Then came the unexpected confirmations. A familiar place suddenly carried new meaning. An old conversation returned to your memory at exactly the right moment. Someone spoke words that answered a question you had never shared aloud. These experiences were not asking you to predict the future, they were gently encouraging you to trust the process. Sometimes life whispers before it speaks loudly, preparing your heart so that when change finally arrives, you will recognize it instead of questioning it. Meanwhile, your soulmate found themselves releasing the final pieces of their past. They forgave themselves for the opportunities they had missed. They accepted that they could not rewrite yesterday, but they could decide what tomorrow would look like. That acceptance became one of the most powerful moments of their transformation. Regret no longer controlled them. Fear no longer dictated their choices. For the first time in a very long while, they felt emotionally free to move toward the future instead of hiding from it. The invisible distance between both of you was becoming smaller, not simply because circumstances were changing, but because your hearts were finally moving in the same direction. Every lesson, every delay, every unanswered question had quietly prepared you for this exact season. What once appeared to be a story of separation was revealing itself as a story of preparation. Neither of you had walked through those difficult years in vain. Every challenge had shaped the strength, wisdom, and compassion that your future together would require. Now the journey was standing at the edge of its greatest turning point. The signs had done their work. The fears had lost their power. The decision had already been made deep within your soulmate's heart, and the path ahead was becoming clearer than ever before. What comes next is not another season of endless waiting. It is the beginning of movement, where unseen choices become visible actions and where the life both of you have been preparing for finally starts unfolding in ways that will change your future forever. Everything that has happened until this moment has been preparing the ground for what comes next. The waiting, the questions, the unexpected detours, and even the seasons that made you wonder if the connection had been lost forever were never separate chapters. They were all leading toward this one. Your soulmate's decision was not made in a single emotional moment. It was forged through countless days of reflection, healing, and quiet surrender. Now that decision is becoming stronger than every fear that once held them back. In the days ahead, you may begin to notice that life feels different in subtle but undeniable ways. Opportunities that once seemed impossible will begin appearing with surprising ease. Conversations you've been waiting to have may unfold naturally. Situations that looked permanently blocked could suddenly start moving forward. These changes may seem unrelated at first, but together they reveal that the current of your life has shifted. What once resisted progress is beginning to cooperate with it, because the season of preparation is giving way to the season of fulfillment. Your soulmate is also stepping into a new understanding of love. They no longer see it as something that demands perfection or guarantees a life without challenges. They now recognize that real love grows strongest when two people choose honesty over pride, faith over fear, and commitment over uncertainty. This realization has transformed the way they see both themselves and you. They are no longer searching for reasons to stay away. Instead, they are discovering every reason to move closer to the future they once believed was beyond reach. At the same time, you have become someone who is ready to receive this change without losing yourself. The person who once questioned their worth has been replaced by someone who understands that genuine love should add to your peace, not take it away. You have learned that patience is not weakness and that trusting the right timing is often an act of courage. Those lessons were never meant to keep you waiting forever. They were shaping your heart so that when this new chapter begins, you can embrace it with confidence instead of fear. The most beautiful part of this journey is that neither of you is returning to who you once were. You are meeting each other as two people transformed by experience, strengthened by healing, and humbled by everything life has taught you. That is why this connection carries a different energy now. It is no longer built on dreams alone but on maturity, understanding, and the willingness to choose each other with open hearts. The moment your soulmate finally chose you, the future quietly began rewriting itself. The path ahead may still hold surprises, but one thing has become clear: the direction has changed forever. The next steps will no longer be defined by silence and uncertainty. They will be guided by courage, truth, and the quiet certainty that what was meant to find its way back to your life has finally begun the journey home. As this new chapter begins to unfold, you may be tempted to look back and ask why everything took so long. You may wonder why the connection had to endure seasons of silence, distance, and uncertainty before arriving here. One day, however, those questions will lose their importance. When you see the complete picture, you will realize that every delay carried a purpose greater than your understanding. Had this reunion happened earlier, both of you would have been carrying fears, expectations, and emotional wounds that could have weakened what was meant to last. Time was never your enemy. It was quietly becoming your greatest ally. Your soulmate now understands something they once resisted. Love is not proven by perfect timing or flawless circumstances. It is revealed through the willingness to keep choosing what is true, even after life has tested every part of your heart. They have reached the place where excuses no longer hold power, where hesitation no longer feels safe, and where the future they once feared has become the future they genuinely desire. The choice they made was not simply to reach toward you, it was to leave behind the version of themselves that believed fear deserved the final word. For you, this season is also bringing a quiet transformation. Instead of searching for constant signs that everything will work out, you are becoming the kind of person who walks forward with confidence whether every answer has appeared or not. Your peace is no longer dependent on immediate results. It comes from knowing that you have grown through every challenge, every disappointment, and every unanswered prayer. That inner stability will become one of the greatest gifts you bring into this connection, allowing love to grow from trust rather than insecurity. As both of your paths continue drawing closer, you will begin noticing that the future no longer feels uncertain, it feels possible. The dreams that once seemed distant begin taking shape through ordinary moments, meaningful conversations, and unexpected opportunities. What once existed only in hope slowly becomes part of everyday life. This is how lasting change often arrives, not in a single dramatic instant, but through a series of quiet moments that gradually transform everything. One day, you will look into the eyes of the person who once struggled to choose courage over fear, and you will recognize that neither of you is standing where you started. You will both carry the wisdom of every difficult season, the strength of every lesson learned, and the gratitude that only comes from nearly losing something precious before finally embracing it. In that moment, the years of waiting will no longer feel like wasted time. They will become the foundation of a love that was refined rather than rushed. So if your heart has been wondering whether this journey has meaning, let this be your reminder: nothing valuable was lost in the waiting. Every challenge shaped you. Every delay strengthened you. Every unanswered question prepared you for this new beginning. Your current life is changing because your soulmate has finally chosen with clarity, courage, and conviction. And as this new season unfolds, you will discover that the greatest miracle was never simply finding each other, it was becoming the people capable of building a future that can truly last forever. If you've stayed with this message until the very end, take a moment to reflect on how far this journey has brought you. What once looked like endless waiting has revealed itself as a season of preparation. Every unanswered question, every quiet tear, every moment you doubted your path was shaping both you and your soulmate into the people you needed to become. The decision your soulmate has finally made is more than an emotional choice, it marks the beginning of a completely new chapter. From this point forward, your life is no longer defined by fear, uncertainty, or the weight of the past. It is being guided toward a future built on healing, courage, and authentic love. Trust that every step you've taken has mattered, even the ones that felt lonely. The story is not ending here, it is only now entering the chapter where hope begins to take visible form. Hold on to your peace, continue becoming the best version of yourself, and welcome the future with an open heart, knowing that the greatest transformations often begin quietly before they change everything. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing what resonated with you the most, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another message created to inspire and encourage your journey. Until next time, may your heart remain filled with hope, your spirit remain strong, and may you always trust that what is truly meant for you will find its way to you at exactly the right time.